that what am I doing outside of those kinds of formal obligations, right? So I think that there's some kind of thought there, but at the same time, for a lot of folks, I do think they need to be reminded of the merit and the value of engaging in those different kinds of things. So what am I talking about? What I'm talking about is this. If there's 30 minutes of tafsir every day being provided by one of the Qalam instructors, if somebody decides this session at 4:30 p.m. Central Time, 5:30 Eastern Time, I'm going to sit down and listen to 30 minutes of tafsir every day. The summary of the juz being recited tonight everywhere, I'm going to learn the meaning of this juz for 30 minutes every day. That I think people need to be reminded that that counts as part of your spirituality in the month of Ramadan. That's not excluded from it. I don't know what y'all's thoughts are in regards to that.
Absolutely. I think that's a very beautiful point that you bring, Sheikh. So the scholars usually differentiate between like the two terms used, tilawa and qira'ah. One connotates reading the Quran without much reflection, and the other is reading the Quran with reflection. Our dear teacher, Sheikh Yusuf rahimahullah, used to say to us that his teacher, Sheikh Zakaria Khan Dahlavi rahimahullah ta'ala, would actually have two mushafs, two copies of the Quran on his table. One of them he used to read from, and that was just his tilawa, where he would just read and read, just without much tafsiri engagement, without engaging so much with the meaning, just reading, Rawangi said, and he would go through, he would say 10 juz a day in that mushaf. So every third day he would do khatam. But on the other hand, he had another mushaf next to that one, and in that one he would read 1 juz a day.
Wow.
And he would do khatam of the Quran through that. And there's like this ongoing debate, and many have written articles and chapters dedicated to it, which one is more virtuous. And I think Sheikh Abdul Nasser solved this so eloquently right now, where in reality it's not a versus situation. The two are not against each other. They go hand in hand and they go together. Sometimes you're doing tilawa and there's a benefit in that, where you're just reading and piling up on the reward and just enjoying the book for it being the kalam of Allah, the speech of Allah. And then other times you're reading it to really engage with it on a very intimate, deep level. And both have immense benefit and faida.
Ustad, a particular question, that I think also, and I'm trying to figure out what's the appropriate way to kind of express his sentiment, but sometimes if somebody has the privilege and the blessing of having memorized the Quran, being a hafiz, right? So you can recite the Quran very fluently, very fluidly, very easily. However, technically speaking, the reward of listening to the Quran is just like the reward of reading the Quran, right? As-sami'u wal-qari fiha sawa, right? That's what the lines within the book say, that when it comes to qira'atul Quran, al-sami'u wal-qari'u fiha sawa. They are the same in terms of they are both getting reward. So can you kind of talk about like the value of listening to the Quran, and how that also sometimes people might underestimate the virtue, the blessing, the benefit, and even just listening to recitation if I can't read it too well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to begin first and foremost by understanding like what's the goal of reading or understanding Quran. What's the goal of it all? All right. Is it some sort of academic pursuit just for the sake of it? Or is there something deeper? And I think very simply put, without trying to sound too profound, it's just getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the goal. The goal is, how can I remember Allah 24 hours a day? Like what's the possibility of that? And Allah ta'ala gives us, in his messenger, ﷺ, they give us a roadmap for that. One of those things is making dhikr, and we know Quran is the best form of dhikr. So if people are like, well, why the focus on reading and listening so much? Remember the goal. The goal is to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as much as possible, right? So if you think that you're doing that, then inshallah you won't have a question mark behind that. So then now we move to the next point, which is listening in terms of reflection similar or the same as reading? And Imam al-Ghazali talks about this too when he talks about dhikr. He says that, dhikr can be a heart that is in reflection, a tongue that is moving, or both. And the best case scenario is both. The best case scenario is that the heart is reflecting, the tongue is moving, meaning that you're saying what you're thinking about. So when I'm saying Subhanallah or MashaAllah or Astaghfirullah, as I'm uttering those words, my heart is actually processing what those words mean. And I'm entering into like this vast, beautiful garden of like reflections of that word. So when I say Subhanallah, I'm like imagining the beauty of the clouds that I'm looking at in front of my eyes. And I'm saying Subhanallah, I'm imagining, the greenery of the grass that was just dead 1 month ago in front of my yard, and I just, so you kind of, and as you're saying Subhanallah, it's not, guys, it's not like, I think sometimes some people, unfortunately, within the fraternity of Islamic scholarship, they may make dhikr inaccessible, but dhikr is just as accessible as oxygen. It's as if you can say it, you can feel it, you can think about it, right? It's one of the gifts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that anyone can be dhakir. Anyone can be a rememberer of Allah ta'ala. So remembering Allah and reading Quran and listening to Quran is something that will obviously make you remember Allah more. So the question Shaykh is bringing up is, listening to it is as valuable as reading it? The answer is absolutely yes. Why? Because what's the opportunity cost? It reminds me of the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he talked about how the companions would be rewarded for expressing affection and love and intimacy towards their families, towards their spouses. And the companions were a little bit shocked, like, Ya Rasulullah, this is a human thing, right? Like, this is part of our bodily nature. This is part of our emotional side, that we express love and affection and intimacy towards our spouses. Is it true that we would get rewarded for that? And the Prophet ﷺ says, well, is it not the case that you would be sinful had you done it outside of the confines of Islam? And they said, yeah. He said, okay, so doing it within the confines of Islam gives you a reward. So could you be doing anything else with your time? Of course. You could be listening to music or podcasts, or you could be watching a TV show. You could be listening to silence, right? You could be just doing nothing. So if you choose to put on the Quran and listen to it as you're cooking, as you're cleaning, and you're listening, right? Like, you're not just like, it's not background music. It's not like you're a restaurant and you're trying to get Mediterranean vibes, right? No, you're actually, you're letting the words of Quran fill your home. You're imagining the angels descending from the skies and surrounding your home and filling you're imagining the nur of the Quran filling every dark corner of your house. And almost like you hire someone or you clean your walls, you're imagining the Quran, the recitation of that Quran is cleansing your home from all of the sins that have happened. And they're like, you're just imagining these things. Then of course you're getting rewarded for that. Absolutely, without a doubt. So, this is something we talked about last night, Sheikh, in our session, and Mufti Saab was there as well, about not undervaluing even the smallest of deeds. The Prophet ﷺ said, "La tahqiranna min al-ma'rufi shay'an." Don't diminish any of your goodness even a little bit whatsoever. So everybody this Ramadan, the goal is have a relationship with the Quran. Can you read it? Absolutely. What if you can't read it? What if you're driving? What if you're working with your kids? What if you're doing something? Then put some Quran on Spotify. It's there. And listen to it. And listen to the same surahs over and over again. And who knows, by the end of the month, you may have memorized something.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, I knew a brother. He was, subhanAllah, for a little while, his job required him to commute like an hour and a half each way. And so he had 3 hours of a commute, and Ramadan came right in the middle of that, job assignment that he had. And he did exactly that. He just kept on listening to Juz Amma over and over and over and over again. By the end of the month, he had a whole Juz Amma memorized. It was amazing. It was amazing. He's just a normal brother. He's not some, qari or student of knowledge or hafid or nothing, but just, regular brother, just trying to be a little bit more productive with his time. And by the end of Ramadan, he was like, wow, I memorized all of Juz Amma.
Yeah, and you can do it to a point where you tell yourself, like, I'm not going to do something until I've listened to my Quran for the day. So yeah. I'm not gonna have my coffee until I've listened to Quran. Now, obviously, in Ramadan, that's a whole different thing, right? Or I'm not gonna take a nap, or I'm not gonna I don't know, work out, or I'm not gonna do this until I finish my 30 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it is, of Quran for the day. And then before you know it, dude, 15 minutes a day, you just listen to like 8 hours of Quran in the month of Ramadan.
That's amazing.
In 1 month.
That's amazing.
So just again, spiritually strategic.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, Ustad Murphy, is that there are ways for a person to engage in dhikr while continuing life. It's continuing to do the things that you need to do in your life. You're finding a more maybe like permanent way of bringing that dhikr into your life.
Absolutely. And right now is not the time for people to say, oh, you know, if you don't know Arabic, then you're not going to understand it. Man, a person can listen to Quran and hear the word Jannah, and they can go on 10 minutes of imagining Jannah, right? A person can listen to Arabic. Like, now is not the time to tell people, look, now you have to start studying. Arabic can be studied the other 11 months of the year. Right now, let people just kind of like hang on to whatever they can. So if you hear the word Jannah or Taqwa or Rahmah or, you know, anything in the Quran, any word that you know, and there's some good apps for this, by the way, that you can have Quranic words and you can just learn 1 or 2 words a day. And all of a sudden now, as you're praying Taraweeh, you're going to hear these things and you're going to let your mind start going on that walk, right? And you'll start to reflect on these things.